Hey, Made in America listeners. Whether this is your first show or you've been with us for 5 years, thank you so much for joining us. Please spread the word about what we're doing and the great things that are happening in manufacturing with somebody you know. Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. Today, I'm with Adam Rodrigues, Vice President of Forge. Adam, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Ari.
Well, listen, man, we got a lot to talk about, but it's the Made in America podcast, and so we start off with the same two questions. What do you make, and why do you make it?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me here.
Welcome.
We make innovative hard tech ideas from Connecticut, made in Connecticut. And so why do we do this? We do this because startups that are making physical prototypes face so many different challenges that other startups in software don't. Only about 3% of hard tech startups will actually make it to market. And so we are here to help support them with education. We're here to support them with connections to manufacturers right here in the state. And we're here to support them with funding when we have it. So that's why we're doing it.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I think innovation is so important. And you're right, in 2024, so often innovation is tied in with like software. Mm-hmm. And one of the great things about software is prototyping, erasing, and restarting, and like trying something out is super easy. Yeah. In hard tech, it ain't that easy.
It's not. It's expensive. It's very expensive, and there's a lot of room for error. So that's why Forge is here to help out.
Yeah, no doubt. And so I definitely we got a bunch to cover. I think it's really exciting because we as part of our mission at Made in America podcast, we obviously spend a lot of time talking to manufacturers and sharing their story, because one of our goals is to make sure that the broader economy and community understands where advanced manufacturing is, how exciting it is to be in, and then another part of our goal is to like raise awareness about manufacturing and how exciting it is and where people can grow in it. And I feel like that's such a mesh with what you guys are doing. You're kind of more even in the trenches, helping them make it a reality.
Absolutely. To give you an example, if we're working with an innovative company, a startup that has, let's just say they're in the clean tech space, right? And we know in Connecticut, aerospace, medical device, right? What's cool is they might need a capability from a manufacturer that's in aerospace. Now, all of a sudden, you have an aerospace manufacturer working with a clean tech innovator, right? So we're exposing them to some of these new industries that they can be part of, industries that they might not have known about being a possibility until Forge came along. So that's another cool part of what we're doing.
So let's talk a little bit about what exactly Forge is and sort of how it works. So, the way I look at it is Forge, I think, has sort of 4 constituencies. People that help fund Forge, people that partner with Forge, the startups you work with, and the manufacturers.
Yeah.
Fair to break it up like that? So maybe kind of like help us understand the whole ecosystem that Forge has brought together to help these sort of startups thrive.
Sure. So Forge is, number one, we're a nonprofit, right? And what we're doing is we're working with innovators and startups that have physical prototypes specifically. And we're meeting with them to figure out where they're at in their product development journey. So that's bucket one you talked about.
Yeah, so the startup being like the core focus.
Yeah.
And by the way, for any startups listening, Forge itself is nonprofit, but you can be absolutely for profit.
100%. We want you to be for profit. We want to make you some money. So that's the first group that we're working with. Yep. The second group is Connecticut manufacturers, right? So there's over 4,000 manufacturers here, and we are trying to figure out who wants to work with these innovators, who's open to the idea of innovation, and how can we make meaningful, right fit, sometimes lucrative connections with these startups. So that's the second group that we're working with. And these can be manufacturers in all different capabilities, all different industries. Our startups need everything. And then the third, you mentioned, we have our funders, right? So thankfully, we're here in Connecticut because of Paul Lavoie and the Manufacturing Innovation Fund. That's our primary source of funding here in Connecticut. And then, we also have operations in Massachusetts as well, which is a mixture of funding from state, from private, foundations, public foundations, grants, things like that. In Connecticut, it's a Manufacturing Innovation Fund, and we're very thankful for them.
And then you also have partners, paid partners as well?
Yeah. We do have a partnership program. So it can expand to anybody that wants to support the work that we're doing, because we are a nonprofit. But primarily, it's designed for suppliers, and that can be a supplier in manufacturing. It can be a supplier at a legal firm. that really wants more exposure to startups. So our partnership program is not a pay for play. If you're a manufacturer and you come to us, there's no favoritism. But what it does do is gives you a proactive opportunity to get in front of startups to talk about, let's just say you're a injection molding manufacturer and you want to partner with Forge. Now we can put together an event where you can talk about injection molding. You can talk about the best practices in that industry. Or if you're a legal firm, you can talk about IP, you can talk about trade secrets, patent laws, things like that, to proactively create exposure for your company and get in front of the over 900 startups that are in our network.
Got it. So that's awesome. And so it feels like, Forge is such a powerful name, but not only are you helping startups sort of forge their way in the marketplace, but you're really kind of bringing together a whole ecosystem to support this like innovation startups in a hard tech perspective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And beyond, because a lot of what we're doing in the ecosystem with entrepreneurship is working with other support organizations. Now, while our main lane is manufacturing, the startups that we work with also need support in other areas. So we're working with places like the Community Foundation. We're working with UConn CCEI's program. All these programs that are offering support in different avenues that startups need beyond manufacturing. So you come to us, we're trying to bring together all of these organizations throughout the state because the state has varied locations, all throughout that have innovation coming out of it, that have manufacturing coming out of it. So we're trying to be a convener and bring everybody together to support these startups.
So I know we have some like great kind of case study examples, and I definitely want to get to that. But Adam, it's a really interesting role that you're in, kind of getting this thing off the ground. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey? I mean, how did you decide to get kind of into this space and get this whole thing started in Connecticut?
Yeah, so I do have a background in manufacturing. I work for a company called Lennox out of East Longmeadow, Massachusetts, and they make hacksaws, bandsaws, things like that. They've been around for a long time. I think currently they're a Stanley Black & Decker company. Okay. When I worked there, they were a Newell Rubbermaid company. But it started off on the shop floor, and this is kind of where I got my love for manufacturing is started off as a machine operator, started to understand the process and planning, and would make little notes for my supervisor and say, well, what if we run this? It's going to be more efficient, that type of thing. And that got recognized, and then my supervisor made me a manager. Then there was an opportunity in supply chain, So my background is in manufacturing. Because of that, there was a manufacturing accelerator program, very much like they do with startups, where you take a startup, you accelerate them, you surround them with mentors. In Springfield, Massachusetts, they did a manufacturing accelerator. So there was an opportunity for me to be a mentor to these manufacturers in that accelerator program. Through that, I learned about this opportunity at Forge.
Were you working? So was the accelerator like a volunteer opportunity?
It was a volunteer opportunity. Yeah. And I just
have you always been someone that goes the extra mile? It's funny as you're telling the story, and we talked about a little bit before the interview. You seem to have opened up a bunch of opportunities by just doing a little more than you've always been asked, right? You're a machine operator, you're making suggestions how to be more efficient. Yeah. You get an opportunity to go into supply chain, you're looking how to make that more efficient. Then you volunteer to do some time at a startup incubator, and then that leads to another thing. Is that just sort of in your DNA?
I guess. I don't know. I mean, if you ask the 26-year-old me, no, absolutely not. This is a different guy, right?
Okay.
But, as life gets, get on, you're starting to have a family, and you really have to take it, by the horns. And I think that listening to different podcasts, using them as kind of like a pseudo mentor, right? Find the guys that you like and follow them. What are they doing? And really kind of developing that own education for yourself. I've learned that this is how you do it. Exactly like you said, you got to go that one extra step and get involved. And, I've just seen so many doors open doing that. And it's not hard work. It's just that one extra step. And right now I try to tell my daughter that, one extra step, that's our motto. Wow. Right? You put the dish in the sink, what's one extra step you could do? Could you rinse it off? Yeah. And so I'm trying to sink that in her head at a young age. But yeah.
That's amazing. Right. Listen, man, I always think that you can learn a lot from it. By the way, now you're on the podcast being the guy that someone else can learn from, which is pretty wild, right?
Yeah,
the other side of the looking glass.
Yeah.
Exactly. Man, that's just such an important piece, that one extra step, that one extra little bit can make a big difference. So anyway, I interrupted you. So you were at the incubator in Springfield? Yeah,
we were at the incubator in Springfield, and a guy who, what's funny is he was a mentor to me. back then, worked in supply chain at Apple. I was super impressed by this guy. His name's Scott, right? He comes to me one day and he says, hey, there's this job opportunity. I think you'd be a good fit for it. And I read it and it was exciting. It said, you're going to work with startups. You're going to work with manufacturers. You're going to be out and about building relationships, because that's really what it comes down to. Is I feel like I'm good at relationships, right? Manufacturing, no, I'm okay. When I saw that job description, I didn't even know what a startup was. I had to look it up, right? So I got excited about it, and talk about coming full circle. And now Scott works with me at Forge.
No way.
Which is so cool. This guy from 2016 that introduced me to this job, just 2 years ago, started working at Forge. Now we work closely together. Very cool journey. Yeah.
So you saw the opportunity at Forge, and the first opportunity at Forge was doing what?
First opportunity at Forge was launching our Western Massachusetts office. So
because Forge started in Eastern Mass in Somerville.
It started in Somerville at Greentown Labs. Yeah. We were working with clean tech incubators. Back in 2015 at Greentown, the CEO at the time, Emily Riker, had noticed that the startups that are under there developing these hard tech prototypes are oftentimes failing. What's going on, right? They're using a lot of their upfront capital on prototypes that just aren't coming to market, or they're sending designs overseas that are over-designed or under-designed. They have these brilliant concepts, but they don't know how to manufacture it, right? At the same time, there's thousands of manufacturers in New England, right? So how can we leverage the experience from these manufacturers that have been bringing products to market for decades and match them?
Decades, centuries.
Centuries, you're right. And match them with the new innovators coming out of these incubator programs, right? And so that's kind of how Forge got its legs.
What a great idea, right?
Cool idea, yeah.
Yeah, what a cool idea.
I know.
It's like exactly what you're talking about, sort of convening or bringing things together. You've got this group over here that has this innovation that's pushing things forward, but doesn't have all the experience of like, how do you move that to market? Then you've got these people over here that understand how to make things and design them in a way that's like efficient and effective. And the two never shall meet, and like that doesn't work.
Totally, yeah.
Oh, wow,
right.
that's cool.
Yeah. So that's how it all started. Through that, there was a initiative in Western Massachusetts. Western Massachusetts can often be forgotten about when you have the big, bad Boston, right? So how can we bridge the innovations coming out of Boston with the manufacturers in Western Mass? And so I launched that office. Through that, developed a whole ecosystem of manufacturers out there that were eager to engage with these innovators. They love the idea of like, let's bring Boston out here. And it was really, passionate work, right? Mission-driven, passionate work. And so that's how it all started.
And what did you learn? So, opening up a new location, it's at least one little bit easier than starting something from total scratch, but it's not, but it isn't easy. What did you learn kind of in your journey of opening up the office for Forge in Western Mass?
It's a really good question, because I learned a lot from that. And I think the main lesson I learned, and I still use it to this day when launching the Connecticut office, is leverage the people in your network, right? Right away, I inherited an advisory council. On that advisory council were leaders in manufacturing. There was leaders in economic development. There was leaders in innovation coming out of the universities in Western Massachusetts. These guys are already connected, right? So how can I leverage them to make myself connected? And that still holds true to this day. That was one of the biggest lessons I learned, is to lean on the people that have been there, the people that have these networks, the people that want to see you succeed. And then from there, it just all of a sudden, meeting one manufacturer. Now I got introduced to 5 more. Now I got introduced to 10 more. And same on the startup side, and same on just building my ecosystem. It can happen quick, which is very cool. I love that.
That is cool. So you got the Western Mass office open, and then eventually had the opportunity to open up the Connecticut operation.
Yep.
Was that well, how did that come about, the Connecticut opportunity?
Yeah. So what's interesting about that is it came about during COVID, right? So with COVID, a lot of...
It must have been such a hard time for innovators in general, and hard tech even more so, when you can't see new people. It must have been a difficult time.
Difficult. And then some of the startups that we ended up working with had established supply chains that got disrupted, right? So
I didn't think about that part.
So for Forge, when COVID happened, we're like, oh man, we're going to be slow, And all of a sudden, just like 5x overnight. Startups reaching out to us from all over the world now. We have Italy contacting us. We have people from Africa contacting us, right? How can you help with our supply chain? Part of that was Connecticut. So we ended up getting contacted by, I want to say around that same time, 3 different startups from Connecticut who said, we love what you do. We actually want to be connected with manufacturers in Connecticut. Can you do that? And we said, we can.
We don't know any of them. But
we don't know any. We can. And all of our resources at that time were to connect with manufacturers in Massachusetts. So we went to Colin Cooper at the time, who was the chief manufacturing officer before Paul Lavoie. And we said, we're meeting with these startups. They want to meet Connecticut manufacturers. Here's what we do at Forge. Can we make this happen? And he pretty much fast-tracked it through the Manufacturing Innovation Fund. Paul Lavoie's carried the torch. And now here we are in Connecticut doing exactly that work.
Wow, this was initially a Colin Cooper innovation.
It was, yeah.
Shout out my man Colin Cooper.
Yeah. That's right. Yep.
Nice. All right, that's good. I'll make sure he listens. He hears.
Not to take away from the work that Paul's done.
No.
Yeah, because he really has. He's just taken it and really embraced it and run with it. And we're so thankful
continue to drive that. That's great. So the opportunity shows up, but now it's like a whole different network. You got to kind of move out of because you grew up in Western Mass. You did your manufacturing career in Western Mass. Yeah. The incubator you volunteered as Western Mass. So I think you hit the nail on the head, right? People don't often know how to leverage their network and the multiplying effects of network, which you did a great job explaining. I'm very impressed by that. But now you got to move to a new place where you don't have that network. So how did you tackle that challenge?
That's why I love this podcast. You ask awesome questions. Like, that's such a great question, right? Because you're like getting in my mind. It was tough, right? I mean, it's tough because I could lean on some of the things that I knew in Western Mass, like you said. Connecticut was brand new to me. But
for
again,
the record, just for people listening that know the geography, it wasn't like he went from like Springfield to Enfield and pretended it was a new location.
Yeah.
Like, you're all the way down in New Haven, which is like a different ecosystem, different education schools, different. I mean, obviously it's only an hour and 20 minutes, but it's far enough away that there's like different ecosystems.
There's different ecosystems. At the same time, you get brought into the state, and for the most part, people want to see you succeed. So part of what comes along with the initiative is, hey, meet Beatrice at Concept, hey, meet Ron at CCAT, and those little things right there, you should have this person on your advisory council. You should have this person on your advisory council. Even though it's a little slower than Western Mass because I already had a smaller network built in, it still happened in that very expedited way where, because people want to see you succeed, they introduce you to other people. And, when it comes to the manufacturers and the startups, that's a little more difficult because Connecticut's it's a lot of area to cover, and there's not a centralized location where the innovation's happening. There's not a centralized location where the manufacturing is happening. It's everywhere, right? So
sort of a blessing and a curse.
A blessing and a curse. Yeah. The miles on my car are nuts, right? Yeah. Because a lot of what Forge does is very much boots on the ground. Yeah. It's going to innovator events, meeting startups. It's going to, manufacturer CT events. It's going to CBIA events, Concept events, meeting the manufacturers. But thankfully, we were able to leverage those groups to get in front of suppliers and manufacturers at an expedited rate. And before you know it, now it's been 2 years. We have almost 100 manufacturers in our network, and we have over 100 startups in our network that we're working with.
Man, that's an impressive. You said it's been how long?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an impressive roster in a short period of time.
Yeah. And
did it meet your expectations, exceed your expectations in terms of speed and quality of execution of the startup here?
I would say it met my expectations. Yeah, if I'm being honest, I would say it met it, which is a win, right? It was really cool because I always trace it back to this one moment. Coming into the state, like you said, knew virtually nobody. And I was just me, right? I'm hiring. It took me over a year to hire, so it's just me. I'm Forge. So after about a year, we had a big launch event. And this was at the Trinity Innovation Center in Hartford. We were bringing together startups. We were bringing together manufacturers. And we're doing a big pitch event. This is my big event that I'm working on. And I had a moment at the event where I looked and I was like, there's over 200 people here that I didn't know a year ago. And this is really cool. I've got 200 new friends in Connecticut, and It's only going to grow from here. So it's been really awesome. Yeah. I think when I don't say it exceeds, just because it's a new territory, it's hard to think about what exceeds means when you're discovering a new territory. You go into it hoping to meet your expectations, your grant deliverables, your metrics, your KPIs. And so I think it met those for sure. And those were even exceeded. However, it was hard to think about what exceed really meant. This is all brand new. I had a small area of Western Massachusetts I launched. I've never launched a whole state. So it was really cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
Listen, man, no, I love the concept. You got to keep pushing. You don't want to rest on your laurels. So I'm with you on the meets versus exceeds. So, I want to spend a little bit of time. We sort of, I think, talked a lot around the journey and what you guys do. I want to maybe bring it to life with a couple of examples, that we talked about. So, I think there was 3 kind of key examples in Connecticut that you shared. So I wonder if we could maybe talk through to help bring this to life for people that are listening to the podcast. So maybe we'll start with flow first.
Yeah.
So maybe I think maybe the way to frame it up is sort of broad overview of kind of what flow is, what the problem or challenge they need help with, and outcome.
Sure. So Flow is a startup that
is FLOE for those of you following along at home.
FLOE, one of the first startups that we worked with in Connecticut, and they came to us. They're out of one of their founders is out of Yale. They're based in Connecticut. They developed a solution for ice dams on roofs. So you have the ice blockage can cause a lot of problems, and they developed a solution that's not only more effective, but it's also more efficient in a clean tech sort of way, where it's a liquid that's pumped up through to the roof, and it's an environmentally friendly liquid that operates better than what's out on the market now. Not being the technical person, I can't go beyond that.
Fair enough. Me either. We're good.
We're good. All right, cool. So they came to us and said, hey, we have this awesome prototype. We have this solution. We've been working with, major corporations to test this thing out. Now we need to figure out, how do we take this prototype and design it for scale? That's the biggest thing with startups, is you can design something, but can you design it to be scaled with a manufacturer? And that's a lot of the work that we end up doing with the startups we work with. So they came to us, how do we design this for scale? How do we get, assembly? How do we get box build? How do we get printed circuit boards? And so we worked with them to figure out where they're at on their product development journey. We found out, what is your manufacturing budget? Because we don't want to connect startups to manufacturers, and just have this hope that it's all going to work out. Manufacturers are busy. We don't want to waste their time. If we connect a startup to them, we want to make sure that they're funded. We want to make sure they're at the manufacturing readiness level that they should be at to work with this particular manufacturer. We connect all these dots to make it a meaningful connection. So Flow comes to us, we figure out where they're at on that spectrum, and then we look to our supplier network and see, all right, who's on that spectrum that lines well with this startup. And we were able to connect them with 11 different Connecticut suppliers, which is awesome, right? Because
that is awesome.
You got 11 different manufacturers that would never have learned about this innovator. You got this innovator that's learning about 11 different manufacturers in their own backyard. And we're bridging that gap at Forge, which I think is very cool work. Now, they end up working with one of those Connecticut manufacturers, right? And so there's a meaningful contract that's signed between the two of them. That's, economic revenue coming into the manufacturer. That's the likelihood that this Connecticut innovator staying in the state will hopefully, when they do scale, stay here. And they were all able to do some of this through not only their connection with Forge, but we offered them, they won a $10,000 product development grant through Forge as well, which enabled them to build on their manufacturing budget. Yeah. So that's one use case. We still work with those guys to this day. So
that's a great use case. And I just wanted to touch on one thing, which manufacturers will probably know, and maybe if startups listening, maybe they'll learn. But this idea that you said manufacturing ready, and I think it's helpful for people to understand that people can think up any kind of crazy ideas, and then they can put together prototypes that work, but don't work when it comes to scaled manufacturing to make it efficiently or effectively from a pricing component. So you need to get to a place where someone works with you to sort of design the product that's manufacturable at scale, not just you could make a one-off or two-off, right?
Absolutely. If there's any drum I could beat when it comes to this whole thing we're doing. We have startups that come to us that are brilliant. They have these designs and these products that are going to, save the world. That doesn't necessarily mean you're equipped with the skills to design for manufacturability. And what happens is a lot of times the product's either over-designed or it can even be under-designed. But what do I mean by over-designed? I mean, tolerances are too tight, or your bill of materials has 50 specially designed components on it when 20 of those could be off the shelf, and we can get that down to 30 components, right? And so what's great about this...
Also, people forget supportability, just to use your ice dam. And by the way, respect to flow. I don't know if this even applies, but I'm just making up something. If you need something that's going to work in an environment that's flowing stuff up to like a roof in very cold weather, which would be the place you'd find an ice dam, you don't want to have like crazy amounts of springs or any type of something in the unit that's going to not work under, that will work in a lab, but wouldn't work under like a cold environment. So you need to think through like what's the manufacturing capacity.
Absolutely. Yeah, to your point, and that's another thing that Forge does is we provide it, the educational component of it. Like exactly that. We've had workshops in ruggedization. So free to startups, come to this workshop. We're going to have a leader in manufacturing talk about what do you need to consider to ruggedize your components so that if you are in a stressful environment like that it's going to sustain that environment and work.
And people forget about that, by the way. It isn't even just about being in cold weather or being in hot weather. It could be like, are you going to be always in the sun? Or, like there's just a million things. All right, cool. That's a great example.
Yeah.
Let's do, let's talk about SedMed.
SedMed.
Which I know is another example. So.
Yeah. SedMed, awesome, innovative company coming out of the UConn CCEI program.
You better explain what that is.
Yeah, so it's the Center for Entrepreneurship at UConn. They're at the Hartford campus. Jem Matthew is the executive director there, doing incredible work. It's one of the first startup events I went to, and what was surprising about the CCEI program is it was a startup showcase. I went there expecting to talk to these startups about, hey, I can hook you up with manufacturing. I can hook you up with education. These startups were already there. They were already advanced. They were showing their prototypes at this event. That's a rare thing. I've been doing this for years. It's a rare thing to go and see. These startups already had customers. They already had production going on. Doesn't mean they were all produced in Connecticut.
Right.
That's where I could have come in, right? But now making that relationship with Jen in the program, we work together to, as she has a new cohort coming in, to say, all right, meet with Forge because we want to have these things made in Connecticut. We want to give you the education you need. So that's the CCI program. So SedMed came out of the CCI program again. Already had it's a toilet innovation, and honestly, this would have been. It could have made all the difference for my grandparents, right? Like, it assists them as they're sitting down. It's almost like one of those reclining chairs that helps you get up. This toilet seat helps you get down, right?
Really?
Yeah, it's very cool. When I met him, he already had customers. He already had small production going on, right? But he's thinking about scaling. He's thinking about iterating on his design. That's where Forge can come in. Now we can find trusted manufacturers here in the state that can work collaboratively with him. So he applied for product development funding through Forge, and through that he won $20,000 at our pitch competition. Because he was part of our network, which is trusted, because he won the $20,000, that showed that he was vetted enough to then attract an angel funder to fund him even further. So if he wasn't at that event, if he didn't win that money through Forge, he might not have had that traction to get the angel funding that he needed. And now we still work with him closely to make sure that the next time he has a production run, let's discover what we can do in Connecticut.
Continue to innovate on that. So that's a great example is sort of touching through where you can engage. Listen, there's just that's just one of. All the stories are really good, but here's one about sort of leveraging the network. Right, this is the thing that we talk about in manufacturing. Writ large, whether it's in Connecticut or otherwise. But you need to be able to build so that the sum of the parts are greater than the whole. And so it's great to see Forge working with an entrepreneurship innovation program, working with an angel funder to help connect manufacturers with innovators. I mean, this is how we're going to continue to rebuild and grow manufacturing in the United States and so on.
Absolutely.
All right. And certainly, last but not least on our examples for today, do you want to talk about ReAbility?
ReAbility, yeah. At a very high level, they are a physical therapy solution. Big, if you look them up online, they have a website, a big prototype, right? Usually we're working with people who have little prototypes.
Right.
This is a big one.
When you think of big, I mean, I haven't seen one live, but on a picture, you could stand in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's big, and it's all for like physical therapy. You could do all kinds of different physical therapies in the unit, and then it collapses down really, really small, so you could store it in a corner and then re-expand it. Is that the innovation?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And so it's a very cool product. It's a family team. You've got the dad, the mom, the sons, all working to, blood, sweat, and tears to bring this because they believe in it, and it's a great solution. So they come to Forge, and they are looking for. In this particular case, they were looking for: is there anybody that can help us stress test this thing? And is there anybody that can help us with design for manufacturability, what we've talked about? And so we connected them with a few
stress test it, meaning. So we have a prototype that works with the innovation being, hey, you sort of have like a physical rehab all in one unit that can be collapsible. So for people that don't know, and I've been to physical therapy many times, so I know that they often try and put it in relatively small rooms. Could be either in a private location or it could be in like a rehab hospital. Space is at a premium, and you have so many different things you need to do in a rehab center. The ability to have something that you could kind of push back into a corner but then expand out is pretty innovative and could be really helpful to maximize a lot of places' space. So it's really cool kind of innovation.
Oh, yeah.
But they want to make sure that it actually stands the test of time, like works. It worked one or two times, but could it work in a commercial environment? Is that what you mean by stress test?
Exactly. And when I say, and that's another thing, I'm glad you brought this up, is that's a big part of innovation with hard tech that a lot of startups don't realize is testing and certifications. You can miss that, right? You can have your product sent overseas, order 10,000 of them. They come back, and then you realize, oh man, if I want to put this in market, I gotta, get C certified, right? Yeah. So that's another thing that Forge does is that we educate them before they make that mistake, so they're not wasting that upfront capital.
Meaning taking their prototype, to use the toilet example or whatever. I don't know how they do this, but you see some of it on TV sometimes, like have a fake butt sitting on it, getting up and off, up and off, up and off, right? Like 1,000 times, 10,000 times, to make sure that it might work 5 times, but if you put it in someone's house, is it going to crack in half in 6 months?
Exactly. And so we work. You can only imagine in medical what some of the, the testing that happens. That's actually most of the journey to bring your product to market is testing. So we work with suppliers that can provide that testing for them, and we educate them about it. So, they're not saying, here's my $100,000 I raised from friends and family and grants, and I'm sending it overseas. We're saying, wait, before you do that, let's do some education about certification. Let's do some education about IP. Let's do some education about design for manufacturability so we can help save those costs and help them make great decisions.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Well, look, dude, this has been really cool. As you think about kind of where Forge is, what do you see kind of happening for you you've said you met your expectations so far. What do the expectations over the next couple of years look like, and how confident are you feeling about hitting those?
Feeling awesome about the next couple of years. The work that we did the first couple of years, one thing that we realized, and this is critical, is that we've worked with almost 100 startups in Connecticut right now. And one commonality is that in Connecticut, there is a lot of opportunities for smaller grants, which can help with prototypes. Friends and family money can help with prototypes. And then there's places like Connecticut Innovations who can help on the venture end when you have customers, when you've already proven out your product and you're making your own production. There's nothing in that middle. We're calling that kind of the production valley of death, right? Ooh. So in our first 2 years, it's been a little bit of a struggle to connect the startups that we're working with the manufacturers because they don't have the money to do it, right? So how do we make them more attractive to these venture firms like CI? How do we get the money into the pockets of the Connecticut manufacturers? So we identified this problem, and we went to the Manufacturing Innovation Fund again, and we said, listen, there's a gap here, right? And if we want our Connecticut manufacturers to start seeing some revenue from these innovators, we're going to need a little bit of support to get them there in the way of $30,000 to about $100,000 in non-dilutive grants. So thankfully, the Manufacturing Innovation Fund heard that, and they were able to give us an award of funding so that we can hand out these grants now, vet the right people, have different application process that Connecticut startups can come to us and say, here is the gap I have right now. Here's exactly how I'm going to work with a Connecticut resource to solve for that gap. That's part of the application is, you can't get this funding and use it for marketing. This funding is to work with a Connecticut manufacturer. So part of the application process is show us your quote from a Connecticut manufacturer. And if you don't have one, by the way, Forge can help you. We know people, right?
I got a guy.
I got 100. So that's what's great about right now is, and what gets me excited about the next 2 years is having that funding to now doing the deeper work and seeing some of these contracts come to life with more meaningful dollars and seeing what's going to come of those, because once you start having a small production run, now the places like Venture and Angel are like, the ears start to perk up a little bit. Okay, you have customers, you have production. Now we can give you the bigger dollars. And
right. So you need to cross them. There's like that gap. You got to get them across the gap. Yeah, I appreciate that. Look, just a few last questions. I'll ask you to wrap it up. But I just want to make this quick point that, if we want to continue to grow manufacturing in the United States, we want to continue to grow manufacturing in Connecticut, we've got to have innovation and new products. So I think manufacturers can look forward to an opportunity to get paid to do some innovation work and maybe ultimately have a bespoke product that they're manufacturing that can help them scale their business along with the prototyper. So that's a pretty cool kind of thing. And Forge has made some real progress. I mean, over $40 million in contracts that startups have been able to spend with manufacturers to make products. So it is doing things. Obviously, I know you guys would prefer that to be 100 times more, and we'll get there. But it's a really great place to be and making a real impact. So I'll congratulate you at the end because I got a few more questions.
Okay.
You talked about your experience about networking and kind of how you're growing. So in the spirit of helping other people learn, do you have a favorite business book or podcast aside from the Made in America with Ari Santiago podcast?
Just answered my
do you have a book or a podcast that you'd recommend? Yeah,
I have a book. I'm sure a lot of your viewers have read it called The Goal. I believe it was Goldway.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, I was gifted this book by my previous manager, who wasn't a big fan of a decision I made on a night shift. And so I show up the next day and that book is on my desk with a sticky note that says, read this. And so it was my first introduction into, theory of constraints and lean manufacturing. But I love that book just because of the uniqueness of how they make it fictional, right? And I think that's a really cool way to learn something. So it actually stuck with me and I thought that was great. As far as podcast, there's so many. I think that's all I do lately is listen to podcasts.
Fair enough.
But Knowledge Project, I would say. If I had
Knowledge Project?
Knowledge Project with Shane Parrish.
After Made America with Ari Santiago.
Of course.
Okay, all right, cool. Just making sure we got to wrap the podcast.
Yeah.
Nice. Adam, what's something that you learned early in your career, early in your life, that you think's helped propel you to success that you've had?
I think it's going back to what we talked about earlier in mentorship, right? You got to lean on the people there that you look at and you say, I want to be like that, right? I think finding those people, whether they know you're their mentor or not, sometimes it can be from afar. It doesn't have to be a direct one-on-one mentorship. You can use somebody as a guide and mirror what they're doing, and you could take pieces of different people that you look up to and make one kind of mentor for yourself. I think that's really helped me. And I wish at a younger age, I knew about the power of mentorship. And I'm still constantly looking for mentors around me. And I even started, I don't know if we have time for this, but I was thinking, how do I keep in touch with these people that I consider mentors? I don't have the time to meet with them one-to-one. So I developed a breakfast, a gentleman's breakfast, we called it. And so now once about a quarter, I bring about 10 of these people together. And they're people I consider mentors, whether they know it or not. I, hide it under the fact of, hey, let's just get together for breakfast. But then I get to pick their brains. I get to watch them pick each other's brains. And it's very cool.
It's called the Mastermind Group. It's really cool. There's a saying that I learned a long time ago, which I've held on to and believe, which I think speaks to what you're talking about, which is find somebody who's got what you want, do what they did, and you got what they got.
There you go. I like that.
That's all about it.
That's it.
Adam, what's something that you learned later in life or later in your career that you could go back and tell young Adam? And if your young self would listen to this advice, it would make a real positive impact on his life.
Yeah,
What's one main thing?
Definitely not listening to it. But yeah, one more thing, right? That's something we touched on. But I do think, honestly, it's so cliche, but do what you love, the money will follow. I really wish I knew that. I was chasing early on, what I thought would be a lucrative career, or what I thought might pan out well in the future, because it was safe. I kind of wish I just, back then, find what your superpower is, what gets you out of bed in the morning, follow that, the money will follow. And the second piece to that is choose your boss, not your job. Those two things, if I had known that at 20, things could have been, I could have gotten here quicker.
quicker.
Yeah.
Dude, choose your boss, not your job.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. Adam, thank you so much for coming and sharing. Thanks for what you do. Really, really important to get people that haven't yet gotten there off the ground. You guys are doing a yeoman's job at it, and we look forward to following you and cheering you on.
Awesome. Thank you, Ari. I really appreciate it.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by Compass MSP.